Hey YouTube, Kira Qualia here, bringing you all my future card Buddyfight Dimension Dragon Lost World deck profile for post Buddy Ragnarok. This is one of my favorite decks, Ranma being also one of my favorite characters in the future card Buddyfight series. This was his main deck that he used during the Ace series, a deck that changes mid-game to the Lost World deck, an awesome mechanic introduced during the future card Buddyfight Ace series as well. So we're going to go ahead and go through both of the decks during this video, with the first one being the search power to get to your main powerhouse of the deck being your Lost World deck, with your main new buddy being Vanity Revolve Destroyer. So let's go ahead and get started. So for the Dimension Dragons, our main go-to card is the Dragon World flag, Dimension Dragons all being Dragon World monsters. With your buddy, it can be a card from either of the decks as well. I decided to go with the newest Vanity Revolve Destroyer, rehabilitated demonic dragon Vanity Revolve Destroyer. You can see the color scheme is even different on the monster with the name rehabilitated. It means it is now for the side of good, just like Ranma being turned back to his normal form from Vile Ranma as well. It's an awesome powerhouse, which we'll get to when we go over the the Lost World deck. But we're going to go ahead and start off with the main deck being the Dimension Dragon monsters for Dragon World. Our first card up on the list is Lost World. We're running two of this card. You can only run two Lost World in any deck, and this card is used to change your main Buddyfight deck to your Lost World deck. At the end of your opponent's turn, you'll pay 2 gauge and cover the flag and swap out your deck to your Lost World deck. These have to be in the main deck to be used, but it's standard in all Dimension Dragon decks to run 2 Lost World for that setup, so just relying on that for your basic engine. For the monsters, to start off with, we're going with the 4 Dimension Dragon Agonia. A very, very important card in the deck for search power. You may only call Dimension Dragon Agonia once per turn. When this card is put from the field into the drop zone, you may drop a Dimension Dragon from your hand. If you do, put the top card of your deck. You check the top 4, add 2 to your hand, and the rest go into your gauge. So not only do you set up for Lost World, you're also able to then basically have your setup ready to go for your hand for any particular cards you may want to search out as well. So I definitely like running 4 Agonia. You can basically just call over this card, because just when it's placed from the field into the drop zone, it doesn't have to be destroyed or anything like that. That much power comes with this card. This can also be the preferred buddy if you wish to not use a card from the Lost World deck. It's just player preference with me having more fun with the deck as well. But Agonia seems to be more of the staple reliant card you can use, but player preference comes down to that point. With some of the other bigger size monsters, I run 4 Dimension Dragon Epis. More search power. You can only call Epis once per turn, and when this card enters the field, you may drop a hand card. If you do, look at the top 6 cards of your deck, put up to a total of 2 Dimension Dragon monsters or Lost World from among them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So with this, you have more search power for any of the cards you're looking for, and the fact that you put them on the bottom of the deck means that you won't have to worry about running into those cards later on during the game. So I like the 4 Epis as well. If you set up Agonia first and then call over it with Epis, you can get the search power of both cards as long as you have the discard power to rely on as well. But for not going over the size limit with Epis on the field, I also like to run 4 Dimension Dragon Chromata. When this card enters the field, if you have another Dimension Dragon on your field, draw 1 card. So usually with Agonia, you'll be over the size limit, but with your Epis, you'll call this out. You'll be able to call out Chromata and not be over the size limit for any of your cards, and still have room for some size 0 plays, depending on what you open up with in your hand. I like the 4 Chromata. Even if you have your item equipped, you can call Chromata, get a draw power, call 1 more, and 1 more if you open up these cards consistently off of each other, or you just have multiples in your hand to use. And lastly, for the 4-ofs, for the main Dimension Dragon Dragon World deck, I run 4 Dimension Dragon Ankos. When this card is dropped from your hand, if you have a Dimension Dragon on your field, put the top card of your deck into your gauge and draw a card. Then if your flag is Lost World, draw a card. It's more draw power and gauge setup, being the perfect cost for cards like Agonia for the drop, because then you'll get the search power for Agonia and then also be able to resolve Ankos, giving you more gauge if you need it for other cards, but more setup for the draw power to go into your Lost World flag, being the most important playstyle of the Dimension Dragon deck altogether. And I'm also running 3 of the new Dimension Dragon Gazly, I believe is how you pronounce the name of this card. You may only call Dimension Dragon Gazly once per turn. Choose up to 2 Dimension Dragon or Lost Vader monsters with different card names from your drop zone. You may pay 1 gauge and rest this card. If you do, put the chosen cards into your hand. So search power. If you go through a lot of different cards in your deck, being able to rely on Gazly for the recycle power of just resting this card, but then you're going to be calling out even more stronger Lost Vader or Dimension Dragons onto the field for your engine power. So I like to run 3 of this for that option. You can only call it once per turn. It's more of a late game card. That's why I'm not running 4 of it, but still like being able to rely on it for hand call power, especially when I use cards like Vanity and Destroyer and I don't have any deck to search out. This card is perfect for that, being able to go for the drop zone for more of that. And if I don't call anything over it, because some of the cards in this deck don't have size, which we'll go over when we get to the Lost World deck, Gazly is just that much better for being able to reuse this card again afterwards. And then for some of the other monsters, I run 2 Dimension Dragon Odio. With this one, you may put another Dimension Dragon from your field into the drop zone and pay 2 life. If you do, choose a card from your deck, put it into the drop zone, shuffle your deck, then put the chosen card on top of your deck. You only use this ability once per turn. So this, you'll be able to set up the Lost World to draw into it. It won't draw the card for it. You'll need to rely on other cards in your deck to draw into it. But it's a size 0, so you can set up Cremata and Epis on the field and have this one also to have a full field of Dimension Dragons to defend you against your opponent also, which I'll go over when we get to the spells. For some of the one-ofs for the monsters, I run 1 Decay Dimension Dragon, 1 Dimension Dragon Daily. This is the newest one for more consistency, for having multiple attacks with a bunch of other different Lost World monsters. And lastly, the 1 Dimension Dragon Dolar. This one protects your cards from being destroyed by your opponent's card effects, or just monsters in your field cannot be returned to the hand. Also, this is very vital so you don't risk your opponent destroying any of your cards, clearing your field, and you being at the mercy of their attacks before you can even get Lost World placed onto your flag at the end of their turn. And that's it for the monsters. For the items, for the main part of the deck, I'm running 2 Dimension Spirit Gun Krakia. It's draw power. During your attack phase, choose a Dimension Dragon on your field. You may rest this card if you do stand it, and draw a card. So if even going first, if you attack with a monster on the field, you can even just rest Krakia and restand Dolar on the field for the draw power at least. You may only be able to attack once, but that draw power with this card definitely does come in handy. If your opponent destroys all your monsters, if they don't destroy your item, you at least have a Dimension Dragon on the field to resolve other cards also. And for the impacts, I'm running 2 D Zenith, more search power for Lost World, being able to drop Dimension Dragons from your hand, setting up your gauge, and searching out Lost World. If you want to run 4 of this card, you can consider taking out Krakia for more of the search power of what the deck was meant to rely on. It's just a big investment, and if you go into Lost World too quickly with this card, you could basically have no cards in your hand to rely on, so be very wary with when you want to use D Zenith. Make sure you have your setup after Agonia and all those other different cards before you activate this impact. And also, for the rest of the deck, relying on the spells that I run, probably one of my favorites in the deck is Desuction. Destroy a Dimension Dragon on your field. You gain 1 life and draw 2 cards. You only cast Desuction once per turn. It's more draw power. If you haven't gotten into your Lost World during your turn, you can activate 1 of these during your turn, and then the second one during your opponent's turn, destroying your own Dimension Dragons on the field for that option. Or even if your opponent were to, wipe out your life points, this 1 life could definitely save you in a tight situation as well. For even more draw power, it doesn't have counter, but still being able to rely on it for more draws, I run 4 DN Bringer. You only cast this if you have a Dimension Dragon on your field. You pay 1 gauge and draw 2 cards. If your flag is Lost World, you draw an additional card and deal 2 damage to your opponent as well. It's a draw 3, so this is the hand resources I was talking about. That's why I like running 4 of this card. You just have to have the Dimension Dragon set up on your field to use this card. And having Lost World is that much more of a bonus. That's why I like to save it sometimes if I have the multiple copies and not charge it, just to save when I know I'll get Lost World and be able to deal damage to my opponent and draw into more of the important Lost Vader cards. And for more defense against my opponent's turn, I run 4 De-Alteration, my favorite shield card in the deck. You nullify an attack, then if your opponent's cards attack 3 or more times during the turn and the phase. You can only cast this when you're in attack on your opponent's turn. You have to have a Dimension Dragon on your field. This is where I was going on about having plenty of different monsters on the field to use, so being able to rely on De-Alteration basically for that play is what I like to do, and then be able to protect myself against my opponent later on also. And then for some of the other spells, I'm running 3 of the new D-Road. You pay 1 gauge, excuse me for that. With this one, you call a Dimension Dragon or Lost Vader monster from your drop zone by paying its call cost. You may reveal Lost World from your hand. If you do for this turn, all Dimension Dragon and Lost Vader on your field cannot be destroyed or returned to hand, and their abilities cannot be nullified. So if you have the additional flag in your hand, this is what I like about D-Road, you can, refrain from gauging it, keeping it in your hand, and get that extra benefit from this card. It's more drop zone power as well. Being able to rely on this card along with the Gasly that we spoke of before for more drop zone plays, because then you'll have to rely on, if you have less of a deck to draw into, these recycle power to get more of the surge power cards we may have had early on in the game to get to more vital cards in our Lost World deck also. For some of the lower numbers for the spells, I run 2 Endless Enmity. It's more setup. It protects your Dimension Dragons on the field, but also able to search some other cards you may run in the deck. You can only have 1 set on the field, but I like to run 2 of this card just so I can see it more often during the games also. And I like to run 2 Decoding. It's a protection card for a Dimension Dragon on my field. For the first time, it would be destroyed. And it also sets up 2 cards in your gauge. So if your opponent, let's say, runs Godpunks and they drain your gauge away, if you can at least rely on Decoding till the end of the turn, giving you that 2 gauge you need for your setup for Lost World. If you don't have the impact, this is the next best thing to rely on also. Plus protecting your own monsters on the field. Even if your opponent doesn't go for the one in the center and they try and take out ones on the left and right, Decoding will protect them. And I lastly run 1 Loss of D. It's just a free cost. I know that D-Road also works great with the drop zone, but just having this additional one, if you don't have the gauge to recycle cards back into your hand, makes it all the better for sure. And that's it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the Lost World deck with, like I said, my buddy being the Vanity Revolve Destroyer. But for the actual deck, I'm also running 4 copies of this card. This card with its ability, it's a true powerhouse. If this card's on your field, your opponent cannot gain life, just like the original Vanity Husk Destroyer. And this card on the field cannot be destroyed or rest by your opponent's card effects. And Dimension Door Turnaround, when this card attacks, choose up to 2 cards in your opponent's field, drop all the soul from the chosen cards, and put the chosen cards into the drop zone. You can restand this card with other cards in the deck. It doesn't have double attack, but it does have Penetrate with a critical of 5 and 30,000 power. This is the powerhouse that can take care of plenty of different cards in your opponent's field. Having multiples of this, and the fact that it doesn't have a size like all other Lost Vaders, means you can just call multiples of this card also for that setup with Dimension Door Turnaround. And just for the 5 critical, you can hit immense damage against your opponent also. I'm not running any Epoch Destroyer because we have the new Vile Demonic Dragon Vanity Epoch Destroyer Revival Buddy going with a whole new text for this card. It basically says with a card that has a card effect that protects on the field, when it enters the field, you choose up to 1 card your opponent's field. For this turn, the chosen card cannot remain on the field, and then you put the chosen card into the drop zone. It gets around so many different cards, being able to go around this ability where it's just not allowed to be on the field. It has double attack as well. This card on the field cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and just being able to call it out when a Lost World monster is put from your field in the drop zone, just like the original Vanity Epoch Destroyer. It's just that much better of a card, being the revival buddy of it. For the setup, you can get rid of plenty of problem cards on the field using Vanity Epoch Destroyer Revival Buddy, and being able to then have these multiple attacks along with Revolve Destroyer for immense damage against your opponent. For some of the other new monsters I'm running 3 Alaro del Reli. With this one, at the end of battle that this card attack, choose one and use one of the following. You put the top card of your deck into your gauge, gain 1 life, and draw 1 card. And also, or you can drop one of your opponent's gauge, deal 1 damage to your opponent, and your opponent chooses and drops a hand card. And it basically has double attack, so you use and resolve one or both of these abilities for if you either want to dwindle your opponent's resources or gain more resources for you to use. It's a great setup card. Having 14,000 power, it's not as strong as some other Lost Vaders in the deck, but still great for the critical pressure and the double attack. Even if you're not going to be destroying cards in your opponent's field, you're going to be draining away their resources or replenishing your own. And to finish off the monsters, I run the 1 Vanity and Destroyer, the card that puts your entire deck underneath it. You can't lose the fight until this card is completely destroyed on the field as well. And it has triple attack, Soul Guard, Lifelink lose as well. That's your losing condition, but you don't have to worry about other decks with this card. Decks that would mill you out. You don't draw anymore. You reveal cards from this card's soul and add them during each turn. So it's basically like you choose the game. There's no luck or randomness anymore involved with Buddyfight. I only run the 1 though. It's all you need. Once you draw into this card, which you have plenty of draw power in this deck, you don't need any other copies. You'll call it out to the field and then just go from there with your opponent trying to dwindle down its soul. And as for the weapons, I run one Lossless Wall for defense against my opponent, being able to nullify attacks as long as I have the gauge to use, and the one Lossless Hyzer, my favorite weapon. It's just a powerhouse triple attack card, and that much easier to equip, as well as I have more Lost World cards on the field also. And for the new spells, I'm running 3 Battle of Valiant. With this card, you draw 2 cards, then gain 1 life. Or for each different Lost Vader on your field, you only cast Battle Valiant once per turn. It's a counter, so you can even use it during your opponent's turn. So just the draw 2 and the gain life is that much more powerful for this card. I only run 3 though. If you wanted to run 4, you could potentially take out the next copy, but I found a pretty good balance that I'm happy with, running 3 Dimension Draw as well. It's a draw 3, discard 2, and you can only use it once per turn, but as long as you draw into some of your other draw power, you should be able to mill through enough of the Lost World deck to hit very vital cards for your plays, including Vanity Revolve Destroyer and Vanity End Destroyer. I also run 2 Dimension Drain. It's my defense card for the Lost World deck. You nullify an attack and gain 10 life as long as you don't have a monster on your center. The gain 10 life, if your opponent's that close to defeating you and you don't have Vanity End Destroyer on the field, this is just your defense card to go for. It can hold off a little more until you draw Vanity End Destroyer or any of your more important cards. It's why I like to run 2 of this spell for that defensive play. I also run 2 Dimension Cruelty. Being able to restand cards on my field like Vanity Revolve Destroyer is why I definitely do like this card, and also just being able to add resources from my drop zone into my gauge if I need more gauge for other cards to call out. And then I run 2 Dimension Slayer as well. You stand all cards in your field, and then for this turn, all cards on your field can also attack during the final phase. If you stand 3 or more cards, you draw a card. You can only cast Dimension Slayer once per turn. It's counter skill as well, so just being able to use this when you want during the final phase for more attacks is your finisher, with other cards as well, like Vanity Revolve Destroyer, having that stand power to rely on. I'm only running short numbers of this cards. The Lost World deck revolves around only 30 cards, so that's all you need to go for. And just being able to open up a bunch of these cards with Vanity and Destroyer also. I also run the 2 Dimension Jamming, being able to make your opponent choose 2 cards from their hand and drop them. You can only cast it once per turn, but if your opponent's dwindling on resources and you add this card to your hand from Vanity and Destroyer, it makes it all the better for sure. And to finish off the rest of the deck, I run 2 Dimension Restraint. This definitely does feel like one of my longer deck profiles since we've gone through 2 decks technically in one video. But with Dimension Restraint, you choose up to 1 card in your opponent's field for each Lost Vader and rest them. The chosen cards cannot stand. It's just a great way to restrict your opponent and their playstyle. The more you have set up on your field, the worse it is for them. And for the final card that I run in the deck, it's the 1 Vanity Zero Blazer, just paying 3 gauge to deal 10 damage to your opponent, which you can easily set up with all the Dimension Dragons from the main part of the deck, and that 10 damage, while you're able to gain damage, should be enough to finish off your opponent with all the other Vanity House Destroyers. If not, it's just that one final push you can use to end your opponent during the game. But that is it for the deck profile. Like I said, it definitely did feel like a long one. I hope you all enjoyed. Definitely enjoying all the different future card Buddyfight decks as well. So look forward to more in the future also from the Buddy Ragnarok set with all of the support we still have to go over. But until then, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira Qualia out.